The Battle of Trafalgar was arguably the most important naval battle of the Napoleonic era. Just prior to the outbreak of the Third Coalition War, Napoleon had been preparing his forces at Boulogne for an invasion of the British Isles. However, the outbreak of war in 1803 forced this grand plan to be postponed. Napoleon was forced to move his Grand Armée away from the coast to face the Austrians and other enemies to the east. At this time, due to an earlier incident where the British attacked Spanish naval vessels, Spain had allied itself with Napoleon. As a result, in October in 1805, off the Cape of Trafalgar, the French and Spanish fleets combined and faced off against the British fleet led by Lord Nelson. The battle formally started on the 21st of October 1805. The Allied fleets from France and Spain had attempted to retreat back into the harbour of Cadiz in southern Spain when they first saw sight of how many ships the British possessed. However, due to the poor training of the crews, this manoeuvre was unable to be pulled off before the British fleet arrived. At the start of the battle, the Allied fleet was led by Pierre Villeneuve and Frédéric Gravigna. The ships were set up in a pair of big lines, as was standard for naval combat of the time, and had 40 ships with 35,000 men in total. In contrast, the British fleet led by Horatio Nelson possessed 33 ships and 20,000 men and had broken away from traditional doctrine and split his fleet up into two groups that would head directly for the Allied lines. As the day progressed, the Allied fleet opened fire upon the approaching ships. It is at this stage of the battle where the British tactic was most vulnerable, as they were not able to return fire properly due to the orientation of their ships. In the south, the British ships led by Cuthbert Collingwood had pierced into the Allied lines and heavy fighting broke out. Due to the proximity of Allied and British ships, the second row of Allied vessels were unable to provide supporting fire. As time passed, the French and Spanish ships began to sink or surrender. Whilst this was happening, the northern British group led by Nelson himself had been subject to heavy Allied cannon fire as they approached the enemy lines. It was here, as his flagship HMS Victory pierced through the Allied lines and engaged in cannon fire, that Nelson himself was shot and wounded by a musketeer on a neighbouring French vessel. In the far north of the battlefield, the Allied ships were ordered to swing down south to encircle and attack the British ships. However, this order was not realised by those northern vessels until it was way too late. By that time, the majority of Allied ships in the south and centre had already been sunk or surrendered to the British. As a result, they promptly retreated from the battlefield to the safety of Spanish ports. By the end of the fight, the British had won a decisive victory. Horatio Nelson later died from his wounds. However, his sacrifice and innovative tactics proved vital in the success of the battle and ensured the dominance of the British fleet for centuries to come. In terms of casualties, the Allied forces suffered just over 4,000 casualties, 2,500 wounded, and 7,000 captured, along with 21 ships. The British, in stark contrast, lost under 500 men and had 1,200 wounded. The British victory at Trafalgar ensured the dominance of the Royal Navy and made it impossible for Napoleon to conduct an invasion of Britain.